And I've got about 20 years or so experience in IT consulting and solution implementation, and the last 10 or 12 of that in the ITIL and ITSM spaces. And I've been ITIL Foundation certified for years, but now I've also more recently become DevOps Foundation certified as well. So kind of what we're talking about here is in my sweet spot today. So let's start. What do all high-performing IT organizations have in common? Well, based on a Puppet Labs 2015 State of DevOps report, which is based on responses from more than 20,000 technical professionals, there's really three things in common. First, they're more agile. Teams are innovating faster than ever and deploying 30 times more quickly with 200 shorter lead times. And they're also more reliable, secondly. By streamlining their process and fortifying infrastructure, those high-performing teams have 60 times fewer failures and recover 168 times faster. And third, they're just winning. Teams that practice DevOps typically exceed profitability, market share, and even productivity goals. So let's talk about today's situation. We know we live in an interconnected and rapidly changing world, and today's businesses have multiple tools for productivity and communication and work, and of course new ones are popping up every day. And the business wants innovation, new technologies, frequent updates to support competitiveness and rapidly changing business requirements. But at the same time, they also want services to be reliable and stable. And as we all know, change is often the nemesis of stability. The more you change something, the more likely it is you're going to break it. In fact, according to Gartner, 80% of all incidents are due to changes, which is an astounding number. But who's expected to deliver these more reliable services? Well, development teams, of course, the very ones responsible for creating all this change. So now Agile and Lean methodologies changed how we developed software in the early 2000s, but ever since then, developers have been tasked with delivering features faster and more frequently, while operations and support teams in IT have to maintain infrastructure, stability, and availability. And of course, customers want both, and that's really where the conflict lies. So to achieve this, we really need to change the way we handle change. So IT organizations are tasked with balancing business expectations while keeping everything running. And within the IT organization, IT teams face several challenges of their own. So there's a continuing pressure to improve relevance of services to the business. IT has to balance the rate of change with stability to ensure business value is actually provided. We find that scattered data or lack of information at all levels limits incident and problem understanding. Deployment failures have a high risk of downtime, and so all too often the lack of communication, because of the lack of communication really, changes are made that IT doesn't even know about. And of course there's redundancy, duplication of work, redundancies, knowledge gaps, handoffs, all those result in higher IT and business costs. And then, just lack of alignment with other teams. Feedback from support often represents customer interest as well. But that customer interest rarely gets communicated to and from development, product owners, product managers. Ultimately, what we find is that collaboration is really the key to business success. IT teams IT teams are responsible, really, for customer interactions, and their success depends upon stability and quality of services. And it's really, often the case that development and support teams have different goals, different methodologies. Maybe they work in different management systems, and over time they become siloed, because of a lack of collaboration, which creates problems through misunderstandings and the lack of shared knowledge. So how do you start to break down these silos to improve collaboration and drive higher business value? Well, IT support and development teams have to work together. And, of course, with all other IT functions as well. So that includes development and operations, and QA and support and testing, everyone. And the DevOps movement was a response by development groups to this very conflict, and it aims to bring these teams together. So IT support needs to understand that and really adopt these agile and lean and Kanban kind of principles so that they can continue to both support IT and business services. So what is DevOps? Well, let's dive in and find out. DevOps advocates that collaborative working relationships between development and IT operations should exist where historically they've been completely separate. Development here in this context refers to teams that develop and maintain software products and services. And, for the purposes of today's conversation, we'll focus on internal developers, maintaining systems and tools that employees might use to be productive, like centralized purchasing, CRMs, and things like that. Operations, on the other hand, refers to teams that deliver and manage and support products and services. And again, today we'll focus on IT teams supporting internal systems that employees use. Companies like Netflix and Amazon and Google today are applying DevOps principles and practices to release faster and maintain the high quality of services. For example, I found out that Netflix does about 100 releases per day, which sounds incredible. So Patrick Dubois, the creator of the term DevOps, said in his blog, DevOps is not about a technology. DevOps is about a business problem. And really the best way to understand DevOps is distilling it into the three principles that were popularized by the Phoenix Project. The first way, systems thinking. The second way, feedback loops. And the third way, continual experimentation and learning. So let's talk through some of those. So the first way is around system thinking. When you cultivate a collaborative culture between development and support teams, you shorten the feedback loop necessary to drive business agility. The functions of a collaborative culture can be further explained by following widely accepted DevOps principles. These ones we're calling the three ways. So according to Gene Kim, the author of the Phoenix Project, the first way emphasizes the performance of the entire system, as opposed to the performance of a specific silo of work or a particular department. DevOps transcends departments and showcases the overall value of a customer. So development teams build and then ship to operation teams, fortifying customer value. And the first way is all about shifting our thinking to the entire system from the customer's perspective versus those singular goals that one team or one department might have. So some examples of system thinking would be never passing a known defect downstream, never allowing optimization locally to create globally some degradation, or maybe just always seeking to increase flow. Now, the second way is around feedback loops. And again, from Gene Kim, the goal of almost any process improvement initiative is to shorten and amplify feedback loops so that necessary corrections can be continually made. So by improving feedback between development and operations and support and customers, all these teams understand their impact to the overall goal. And we find that clarity and collaboration between teams breaks down barriers, improves productivity, reduces conflict. When teams work together from the same feedback loop, communication breakdowns just really become a thing of the past. And our third way, around continual experimentation and learning. So again, a quote from Gene Kim, creating a culture that fosters two things: continual experimentation, which requires taking risks and learning from successes and failures, and understanding that repetition and practice is a prerequisite for mastery. So this might involve things like allocating time for experiments or creating rituals that reward your team for risk-taking and success. So how do we put DevOps into practice for IT support? Well, luckily, there's already a framework in place called CALMS. And that was coined back in 2010, and it includes a focus on culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. So let's take a look at how we might apply CALMS to the IT support model. Well, first is culture. Culture is all about daily or weekly rituals that influence how a team works. So we're looking to shift from those silos to constant communication. DevOps is all about agility and speed. And so some rituals that you might apply to your team around this would include things like daily stand-ups or hack days or chat rooms or maybe sprint planning or Scrum or retrospectives, maybe the Kanban framework, maybe just IM chat solutions used to encourage collaboration. And then, of course, focus on results and not just activities. So don't obsess on the number of changes in your environment. What really is important is the results of those changes. You just need to measure everything and determine improvement based upon those measurements. And then understanding behaviors. So culture is really about habits. It's really the result of habits. So you need to understand how your teams work together so you can know exactly what you need to improve on. So the A in CALMS is for automation. Automation works when it supports the people and processes that are already in place. So you can go from trapped knowledge to shared knowledge with things like being sure that known errors are tracked at the time of deployment and communicated to support, so that's not a surprise to them. Support should maybe link knowledge articles to incidents and problems so that everybody understands what's causing those issues. Also shifting from orphan tickets to linked tickets. All of your teams should be responsible for linking and ticket linking between each other and documentation, including service desk staff, admins, developers, operations, so everybody knows what's going on. And, of course, link incidents and problems to requests and changes and releases. And don't just deploy, but support. So continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment are all core to the first way, where we're thinking about the performance of the overall system. So your team needs to be prepared to support and operate and ensure their own ability to restore services. They need to know what's being deployed and when, so they can give the right answers to the customer at the right time. And the ITIL forward schedule of changes concept is a construct that can be applied here. And, of course, help with testing. Automated testing is a key, really, to a DevOps environment. But on top of that, IT teams that do support hold data about their various customer environments that needs to be continually fed back to the testing group. They need to know what's going on in the actual customer environments. And, of course, support is on the front line, so they have firsthand knowledge about that. And then keeping up with monitoring data. Support needs to know about any proactive monitoring and provide requirements for that monitoring, even like with events linked back to incidents and problems and changes, so that they need to be involved in determining what's going to be monitored and be responsible for part of that. So the L in CALMS is for lean. The lean approach came out of the automotive manufacturing world, actually, and it focuses on things like eliminating waste, making sure that your processes are as simple as they can be. So taking a look at the question of what are we doing today that doesn't add value, and then eliminating duplicate work or any unnecessary administration, and continuing to improve. That continuous improvement in IT support is about constantly iterating on your processes and services to deliver high-value services to the business. And, of course, failure is normal. Many people don't realize that, but one principle of lean and the third way is understanding that if you're not failing, you're not really getting anything done. So what was learned should be the most important thing your team reflects on. So create a ritual of post-incident or post-mortem reports based on lessons learned that are shared across your teams. It'd be sort of like the sprint retrospectives from the agile software development side of the house. Now, the M in CALMS is for metrics. The goal here is just to keep track of only metrics that matter. So measure mean time to repair and whether it increases or decreases over time. Measure repetitive incidents and how often they occur in a period. Measure service level targets in your service level agreements and operational level agreements in the context of deployments. And look at what the impact is to those deployments on achieving all of your goals. And costs. So what are your costs per incident along with the total cost of support? You have to take this into account with downtime costs too, because in some cases, increasing support costs may actually be the best thing to do to minimize impact to the business. And then finally, the S in CALMS is for sharing. when it comes to sharing, you got to ask yourself questions like, does the organization understand what we're doing? Do we share that understanding with them? Do all teams understand each other's goals and hardships and priorities? Do your team's processes output flow with other teams' processes so that they pick up right where you leave off, or vice versa? And do the things that your support team knows, are all those shared with others? And if it's in a system, is it accessible to other people, or is it a siloed thing? And then, around communication. So how is your team collaborating with others? Are there unbarred channels for communication between them, or is management for some reason standing in the way maybe? Are the right stakeholders kept in the loop on your projects, even if they're not in your immediate group? And do your IT groups, like development and operations and testing and support, and even the business groups, share ownership of successes and failures and learning? And around tool sets, do your team share tools and information? And if not, do those tools integrate with each other so that they can? So how do we define success? Well, success is really effective processes, not just efficient processes. So we need to look at innovation. We need visions and goals that are linked to business outcomes. We need sharing. We need categorizations and tools that enable collaboration. We have to ensure that the tools work together. And getting development and IT support on the same platform is a really great way to do this. And we need to realize that incidents and problems and changes are really part of an IT backlog of sorts. What we decide to fix or what we decide not to fix is really based on the organization's need. So it really often acts more like a backlog than just a strict to-do list. And improvement. We need to continually improve service design, transition, operations. So what are the critical success factors to applying DevOps to IT support? Well, it's important for all of your teams to understand one another's goals and agree to the same set of goals. That's really key. And everyone needs to agree to timelines and objectives, and everybody should participate in setting those. That doesn't come down from the top. We need to be using a common vocabulary as well, and to be sure that we're all doing things the same way. We need to be applying learning to people and processes and automation. We need to ensure that goals are set as on our outcomes, and then we measure against those goals. And what kind of metrics do we need? And we want to reward and recognize teams as a way of reinforcing good behaviors. And gamification is a great way to do that. That's available in a lot of the tools these days. So like Dick mentioned earlier, Brightstar is an Atlassian partner, the solution vendor who provides a DevOps-focused platform that joins both ALM and ITSM together with products such as Jira Software and Jira Service Desk, Confluence, HipChat, Bitbucket. I'd like to share some stories with their solutions and how two companies used Atlassian to really succeed. And both of these companies have brought their development and support teams together using the Jira platform. So the first is Puppet Labs. I mentioned early on one of their reports from a couple years ago. Puppet Labs was a small tech startup which turned into a venture-backed company with more than 300 employees. And when that growth occurred, they found themselves at a crossroads. They needed to either scale their support channels, and they also needed to maintain service levels. And they're a builder of IT automation software on-prem and in the cloud, and they turned to Jira Service Desk for help. Their Puppet Labs IT manager, Nick Cunningham, noted that since deploying Jira Service Desk, they've had their resolve tickets increase by almost 67%, which is clearly a sign that their Service Desk team is able to actually get more work done. Today, all 300 of the Puppet Labs employees are supported by Jira Service Desk. Mr. Cunningham also noted that with Jira Service Desk and the entire Atlassian stack, they've been able to increase user adoption by staying in the same system, streamlining the maintenance process and reducing their overall cost and labor for maintaining those systems. With those Atlassian products, Puppet Labs is able to streamline its workflow and add critical efficiency and provide help to their customers that they need quickly. A second success story is around Skyscanner. So millions of people use book trips with Skyscanner's global search engine every day. And with all those thousands of searches going on every second, it's really no surprise that they take defects in their software systems really seriously. So to streamline the defect reports that came in, they needed a new type of service desk. Michael Hall, Skyscanner's business tools development lead, stated that they're building better software by fixing bugs twice as fast since implementing Jira Service Desk. Now, today, their 700 employees in 9 global offices are helping improve their global search engine with Jira Service Desk. He also noted that end-user customers actually get email updates from the system so they know when problems are fixed, and they can understand, or at least help to understand, their impact on the total product improvement. So again, with Atlassian, Skyscanners can now focus on individuals and interactions and no longer really limited by tools. So what's today's takeaway? Well, in conclusion, faster, better service is about culture, sharing, and tools to enable your team. A collaborative culture is critical to success in DevOps. Aligning support and development can help your organization understand what services the business wants and needs to be productive. So what should your takeaway from today be? Well, first, use DevOps principles to support your IT processes. Start today by beginning to apply the 3 ways of DevOps and columns to your IT support. Second, emphasize teamwork and collaboration to get Dev and Ops under the same roof by focusing on culture, by emphasizing collaboration through training and incentives like simulation training and gamification, by focusing on metrics, by measuring everything. Maybe start with benchmark studies, by focus on consolidation, by moving disparate systems from Dev and Ops separately together. So I believe that's what I have for you today. Dick, have we had some questions come in as we have been talking today?
We have, and great job, Alan. Thanks very much. I wanted to just ask you a couple of things that came to mind for me when I was going through there. And by the way, now would be a good time to ask a question. There's a Q&A box, and you can go ahead and submit the questions. I liked, Alan, how you went through the presentation, and until you really got to the success stories, you didn't say anything about any particular tool set. So the question that I have is really, and you can think about this for a minute, but how important is the tool set? And while you're thinking about this, you and I we were visiting a customer, it's a longtime customer, and they had a different group that we met with yesterday, and they were using a tool set, and we asked them, we said, well, most organizations use only a small fraction of the available capability of that tool set, and I said something like, I suspect you're using around 10% of its overall functionality, and she shot back and said, well, no, I think it's closer to 5%. So it's kind of like, what oftentimes what we see is that the customers will look out there, and because there's so much pressure from these software manufacturers to sell software, that it's kind of like, getting a new set of golf clubs, because those of us that play golf, I mean, you always want to do better, right? And so what do you think is going to help? Well, let me get a new set of golf clubs, right? That's really going to make a huge difference. And it's true that some of the newer golf clubs might give you a little bit more distance off the tee, but if you don't go back and really work on your game and maybe take some lessons to fine tune your swing, new golf clubs really aren't going to make that much of a difference. And I think that's a pretty good analogy to what we're talking about here, to the move to more agile or more of a DevOps approach here, is that the tool set is important, but most organizations are only going to use a small part of that tool set anyway. And the software vendors may mislead us a little bit, because all they care about is selling software. And I've seen examples, not with anybody that we represent, but with examples of software companies that will literally back the truck up to the loading dock, and offload everything, knowing full well that the customer is not going to really implement but a small, very small fraction of all those different options that they just bought. So, do you have any comments about that? I liked how you went through this whole the CALMS approach, right? Automation, measure, share, and everything else. So, is there anything that pops to mind?
I think that's one of the things about DevOps that is probably important to note, that it's a methodology around culture. And you could probably implement this in any tool. You could probably even do some of that collaboration in email if you had to. Now, there are tools like the Atlassian suite that are geared towards teams and collaboration and all those things that might lend themselves better to that sort of thing. But ultimately, the principles are really technology agnostic, because really it's about that culture. Now, one thing I will say is that a tool set that can be used by both sides of the house is probably a better approach from a cost perspective, one, so that you're not supporting two disparate systems, one for dev and one for ops, as well as being able to exchange information back and forth between them and visibility in between them. So I think that's probably one of the big keys, is to be sure that the tool set that you have supports those principles. But I don't think it points to a really specific vendor or specific tool. Does that help?
Oh, yeah, I think that's an excellent answer. And again, I think that it's foolish, really, if we go back to the earlier conversation, to blame this 30-step change management process on the tool set or on idle. It's really the process and whoever the consultant was that went in there and set that up. That's what happened here, and that just doesn't make any sense. Well, let me ask another question. And I was reading this morning about another tool set vendor who made a huge investment. They got in automation because they're thinking automation's important. Artificial intelligence is right around the corner here, and the whole idea here is to automate everything. And of course, that's one of the principles that you spoke about as well. Could you kind of review some of the things? I mean, you could turn back to that slide if you want to. But was there anything that kind of stands out that you really think is important, or that you've seen companies do? Maybe it's the integrate and change and configuration management, or maybe it's having the whole onboarding process be sort of a seamless, rapid kind of a thing. Is there anything like that you've seen that works pretty well if somebody's interested to sort of figure out how to get started in that area?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is something an old boss, who was a very quotable man, shared with me one time. You can't automate something you can't do manually. So there's no way to come into your environment and automate something until you know how that process works manually. So I think that's key, first of all. I think people get excited about automation and think, oh, great, we'll be able to. Well, if you can't figure out the process, there's no way to automate it. So I think that's somewhere to start. And then it's just a matter of automating where you can. One of the sort of principles around this is the theory of constraints. Doing an analysis of where the long pole is in your tent. What is the thing that's holding me up the most? And then begin to fix that. And often that piece is an automation piece that's put in place. And then when you get that fixed, then there's another thing that becomes the long pole in your tent that you want to work on to continually begin to increase your efficiency and reduce downtime and staff load and all that sort of thing. Definitely, the HR onboarding pieces are a place where I've seen many clients focus that sort of automation, because there's so many predefined pieces that have to happen every time you onboard somebody, that to deal with that and come up with those every time outside of an automated process just starts to not make as much sense. And of course, automated testing on the dev side of things is a huge thing as well. With as many platforms as we are deploying to, with multiple browsers and multiple OS and then multiple mobile devices and so on and so forth, that sort of automated testing piece becomes really critical to be sure that you're covering all of your configurations.
Okay, those are good. Those are great examples. So I like that quote too. Okay, well let's take a look. There's some. Yep, let's take a look at some questions. First question here that's coming in a DevOps environment: who is responsible for incident management? And I guess wouldn't there be an incident management team that's set up, and that's that handles both dev and ops? Is that what the question's about?
Well, I think it sounds like that question is geared towards, so if we get out of the traditional IT support model and separate dev model, then who's responsible for incident management? And I think maybe a comment here about sort of the RACI model. I don't know if we're familiar with that. I may struggle to think of all the, responsibility, accountability, collaboration, and information. So I believe that your incident management team remains responsible for incident management. The difference is they begin to loop in a bunch of other people. So I don't know that the responsibility for incident resolution moves out of that group, but what they do is fed by the operations team, and what they do feeds the operations team. So it's more of a collaborative environment as opposed to a passing of responsibility, I'd say.
I got it. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, next question here is how do you convince your support teams to move to a DevOps way of working? What are the benefits to them? We are doing DevOps in pockets in our organization, but it's challenging to change the organization as a whole.
Well, I will say that we run into that often. And really what that requires is some executive sponsorship, and sometimes to the point of just saying this is the way we're going to do it. But until you have the buy-in at that higher level, individual teams can decide what they want to do, and of course can make some great progress towards improving the processes and company goals and all that overall. But until you get everybody on board with that, you can't be nearly as efficient with that. And unfortunately, I've never found a way for devs to say, ops, you need to do this, or vice versa. It really seems to need to come from the top, with someone making an executive decision that here's the direction we're going to take.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind that we've had some success with, and because change is often so difficult in organizations, nobody wants to change. They like the old way of doing something, that we offer a couple of simulation classes, and they're very quick and they're a lot of fun. And so I like to say, idle and fun is typically an oxymoron, but it doesn't have to be, right? We offer on the idle side, there's a class called the Apollo 13, and what you try to do is bring the astronauts safely back to Earth, and it really teaches you we go through this exercise several times, the value of incident, problem change, and configuration management. And then there's another class, and it's very similar, and it's based on the DevOps Handbook, which is a book that was written by Gene Kim and a bunch of other guys that came out not quite a year ago. And that sort of shows you what is the real value of DevOps within an organization, and how. The ideal approach is to have this class maybe before you do a new process rollout or even a tool set rollout, and get everybody working together cooperatively in a room. These are only a couple 2 to 3 hour classes, so they don't take up a lot of time, and they're a lot of fun. And you get to sit in other people's shoes, and on the DevOps side, really understand the whole value of the DevOps, some of the DevOps principles. So that's a fun thing to do, and it doesn't cost a lot, and nor does it take very much time. So there are some kind of fun things to do if you want to try to ensure that you're going to be successful with a rollout or some sort of a change within your organization. So let me see. Do you see? I don't know that there are any other questions that have come in. I think we've done a pretty good job of getting through the material in a short amount of time. Alan, I certainly want to thank you for your time today and going through that webinar. I got a lot out of it. Excellent job. I hope that you all that are on the line felt the same way. And again, I want to thank everybody out there for attending today. As you probably know, we do these on a regular basis, about every other week or so, and on different types of topics. So thank you for joining us, and we hope just to see you the next time. So that's all I had. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Alan, and for RightStar and for me. We'll see you the next time. And so long, everybody. Have a good rest of